Tommy Rees won't be joining the LSU staff. So where do the Tigers look? Let's talk about it. Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you for that. We'll get you an LSU Arkansas recap on the hardwood. You have got to hear what former Notre Dame quarterback Brady Quinn said about Brian Kelly. Oh, that's coming up in just a quick second. But another former Notre Dame quarterback is where we will start today. Tommy Rees, who played quarterback at Notre Dame under Brian Kelly, who was the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame under Brian Kelly, and who Brian Kelly tried to hire when he got the job at LSU in 2022, will not be joining the LSU staff. That's because Tommy Rees has been promoted by the Clevelnad Browns as their new offensive coordinator. So let me go back and I'll catch you up. So just very quickly for the catch up for those who don't know. LSU is looking to fill one spot on its coaching staff among the 10 full-time assistants. Slade Nagel, who came to LSU from Tulane, was here for 1 year as the tight ends coach and special teams coach as well. Well, Slade Nagel left LSU shortly after the end of the regular season to go join Willie Fritz's Houston staff as their offensive coordinator. Great opportunity. Congrats to Slade Nagel. It's an opportunity to reconnect with the coach who hired him at Tulane and also to be an offensive coordinator in the Power Four. Remember, Houston's now in the Big 12, so a really nice opportunity for Slade Nagel to go be a coordinator and continue the upward trajectory of his career. Well, that left open one spot on Brian Kelly's staff as the tight ends coach. And yeah, it's a spot that still hasn't been filled. And not only has it not been filled, there haven't even been whispers, rumors, interviews, anything. Baton Rouge is a small town. And LSU is a small community. It is hard to keep things a secret around LSU. Stuff leaks around LSU. Anyway, if Brian Kelly had someone in mind, we'd have heard about it. So I use deductive reasoning. And I want to be very clear because there's some of y'all who like to hear what you think you want to hear, and it ain't exactly what I'm saying. And so I've had to be overtly clear whenever I've talked about Tommy Rees now. This is my opinion. Big flashing neon sign opinion. I'm not breaking news. I'm not telling you anything I know. I'm giving you an opinion. And my opinion is that makes a lot of sense. Tommy Rees played quarterback for Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. After a short NFL career, Brian Kelly hired Tommy Rees at Notre Dame, elevated, became his coordinator. When Brian Kelly got the job at Notre Dame, at LSU, he tried to hire Tommy Rees as his offensive coordinator. That is fact. That is on the record. Tommy Rees decided to stay at Notre Dame as OC under Marcus Freeman, did that for a year, and then went to Alabama for a year. And when Nick Saban retired, Tommy Rees was out of a job, and Rees went to the Clevelnad Browns this year as their passing game specialist and tight ends coach. So LSU needed a tight ends coach. Wouldn't it stand to reason that the guy Brian Kelly tried to hire might be available? I bring all this up to say, and so Ken Dorsey got fired as the Browns OC. Kevin Stefanski, the head coach, had ceded play calling duties to Ken Dorsey. Remains to be seen if Dorsey will if Reese will be the play caller, if Stefanski will be. Don't know. We'll see how that all plays out. I don't really care about the Cleveland Browns, so it's not really that big of a deal. But I bring this up today for one key reason. And the reason is that at some point, Joe Sloan, LSU's offensive coordinator, is going to be a head coach. I know this season there was a lot of conversation about Joe Sloan and maybe his effectiveness as a play caller and if he would be back. I think largely that was a fan narrative. I do think there's something to part of the conversation because Brian Kelly did involve himself in play calling late in the season. So I'm not saying it's a nothing burger, but what I am saying is Joe Sloan has been a very effective quarterbacks coach. He gets a lot of credit for helping develop Jaden Daniels. Remember, one of the big knocks on Jaden Daniels when he showed up was his inaccuracy. That ain't no problem no more. Joe Sloan deserves a lot of credit for that. I mean, he was the quarterback's coach for Jaden Daniels for those 2 years. And LSU this year had a 4,000-yard passer in Garrett Nussmeier. And that was after losing Jaden Daniels and 2 first-round picks at receiver. So I think Sloan's done some things really well. I'm not saying he's without blame or flaw, but Joe is a well-respected young coach. He's a very good recruiter. He's a good quarterback developer. He knows offense. He's going to become a head coach eventually. So eventually, Brian Kelly is going to have to hire a new OC. I don't know when that'll be. Not after this season, it seems, or next. We'll see how it goes. But Tommy Rees would always seemingly be a guy on that short list. So now I think you really have to ask the question, does Tommy Rees want to coach in college again? He's 32 years old, so he's a young guy. He's got his whole career ahead of him. But it's a question worth asking. He's a guy that was at Notre Dame under Brian Kelly, spent a year at Alabama. This year was with the Clevelnad Browns as their tight ends coach. And now when presumably he might have had an opportunity to get back into the college ranks, is staying in the NFL. So does Tommy Rees see himself more as an NFL coach? Does he like the NFL lifestyle? I don't know. If Tommy Rees walked through that door right there, right now, and walked in here, I'd have to shake his hand and introduce myself, because he and I have never met, never said a word. I don't know nothing about Tommy Rees. Nothing. I'm just giving you a completely speculative observation based on circumstantial evidence around Tommy Rees and Brian Kelly and their relationship. But it stands to reason that if he stays in the NFL, Brian Kelly would have to look elsewhere. But that's one guy we'll keep tabs on. And sometimes the obvious choice is obvious for a reason. I remember that when John Chavis left LSU to go to Texas A&M, the first name that was mentioned by everybody for a defensive coordinator was Kevin Steele. And there were so many people who poo-pooed it, said, it's too obvious. Everyone says Kevin Steele. And it ended up being the choice. And it was obvious because it was the right choice. Sometimes the obvious choice is obvious for a reason. And so with Tommy Rees and Brian Kelly, there's a relationship there. And it stands to reason that at some point, Brian Kelly may try to hire Tommy Rees again, because he already tried to hire him once. So we'll keep tabs on Tommy Rees as his career goes along. But for now, he won't be. So who will be for LSU? I don't know. What I do know is that when they hired Slade Nagel, they hired a guy with deep ties to Louisiana, a guy that coached at Tulane, a guy that coached at Northwestern State, a guy that had recruiting responsibilities all over the state of Louisiana. So that's a guy who'd been at McNeese. So that's a guy who knows every corner of the state, can recruit this state. Well, now that's a vacancy on your staff. And you got guys on the staff that know the state of Louisiana. Look, Joe Sloan was up at Louisiana Tech, and his territory when he was at Louisiana Tech was South Louisiana. You got Frank Wilson, who obviously has New Orleans covered. You got Cortez Hankton, who can recruit New Orleans. You got a lot of guys on the staff with ties to this state. But my guess is whoever Brian Kelly hires in that spot, if it wasn't going to be someone like Reese, who we wanted, it's going to be someone like Slade Nagel, who has deep ties to the state. People do often ask, will LSU hire a special teams coordinator? I don't think so. At least not specifically. You need a tight ends coach. And I think the big part of the reason is, first of all, your special teams performed better this year. Damian Ramos was solid as a place kicker again. Aaron Burrell was all conference as a kickoff specialist. You were dramatically better in the return game. Both Xavion Thomas and Aaron Anderson returned kickoffs for touchdowns this year. So your special teams were actually much, much better this year. You did not have a solid punting game. Now, you were very good at punting the past 2 years because Jay Bramblett was really good. But all that to say, you have a guy in Bob Diaco who is an analyst on your staff. But remember, analysts can coach on the field now. So really, you have a guy that had been a special teams coordinator that handles all of your special teams. So you kind of have that role. What you need is someone who's a recruiter, who can also handle the tight end role, which is paramount for this hire. So that's the one hire Brian Kelly's got to make. As we find out more about it, we'll certainly let you know. Okay, we'll knock out a quick break. When we come back, speaking of former Notre Dame quarterbacks, wait until you hear what Brady Quinn said about Brian Kelly. Oh, you have got to hear this. It's next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Wayfair. After the holiday hustle, there is nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space kind of gets me back into a routine. As a matter of fact, you probably noticed if you watch the show, I've lost a bunch of weight. I actually spent part of the holiday cleaning out my entire closet, probably got rid of 80% of my closet. Well, whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair has everything you need, and it's all within your budget. Quite honestly, if you're watching, not listening, the desk that I'm sitting at right here, I got from Wayfair. The chair I'm sitting in, I got from Wayfair. Just made a new hire at work where I'm the program director. Our new hire ordered her desk and her chair from Wayfair. So listen, the free and hassle-free delivery, even for larger items, is quite honestly my favorite part. Wayfair's site is so easy to navigate. You can find everything you need in no time. There's something for every style, every home, or every office. And Wayfair makes it easy to tackle your New Year's home goals with endless inspiration for every space. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. I don't mean to kick this anthill again, but the Brian Kelly, Marcus Freeman conversation kind of evolved once again, and I've got to talk about this. So Brady Quinn, is a former Notre Dame quarterback who takes great pride in his school, as he well should. He had a very nice career at Notre Dame, became a first-round draft pick. His last game at Notre Dame, you might remember, got his head kicked in by Jamarcus Russell and LSU in the Sugar Bowl. Boy, that was a lot of fun. Well, Brady Quinn now is on the Fox Big Saturday Kickoff, whatever they call their show, Big Fox Saturday, whatever, the pregame show on Fox. Well, Brady Quinn is on a podcast called Two Pros and a Cup of Joe. And this was after Notre Dame beat Penn State to punch their ticket to the national championship game. And the conversation, as soon as that game went final, my Twitter mentions, immediately were Brian Kelly, Marcus Freeman, did Notre Dame win the divorce, all that sort of stuff. If you would go Google Brian Kelly's name, do it right now. Go do a Google search for Brian Kelly's name and see what the most recent articles that come up. It's all about Brian Kelly was the big loser of the playoffs so far. Notre Dame won the divorce, all that sort of stuff. Now, I've shared with you my contention on the whole Marcus Freeman, Brian Kelly conversation, and it's an evergreen. As a matter of fact, you can scroll back a few episodes, and we talked about it then. I did the Kelly versus Freeman debate. You can get my thoughts on it. I'll give you a little more. But ultimately, I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version. My contention is Brian Kelly left Notre Dame, picked LSU, and said point blank that he wanted to be at a place where he had the resources to win a national championship. Except Brian Kelly was right. Notre Dame, Lou Holtz won a championship in 1988. After 1994, Lou Holtz's last double-digit win season was in 1993. From 1994 until Brian Kelly arrived, Notre Dame had 2 double-digit win seasons. Brian Kelly had 7 of them. He elevated Notre Dame to a point they had not been in 2 decades. And the reason they had not been there in 2 decades was in part because they hired a lot of bad coaches. But the other part, too, is the advantages Notre Dame thinks they have, they don't really have. A 17-year-old recruit from Florida or California or Louisiana doesn't care about Lou Holtz, let alone the 4 horsemen. In those kids' lifetime, Notre Dame has been irrelevant. And the one advantage Notre Dame had on top of its history was its NBC contract because they were on TV every week. Well, everybody's on TV every week. Notre Dame is in a remote part of Northwest Indiana. It's a crappy town. I lived there for a year. There's no talent in the state of Indiana. You got to recruit nationally. There just aren't advantages there. There are inherent disadvantages for Notre Dame. But people who go to Notre Dame revere that place so much they cannot think of themselves as anything but the best in everything when clearly they are not, as evidenced by the fact that for nearly 30 years now, they have been irrelevant, actually more than 30 years now, almost 40 years. They've been irrelevant on the national landscape. So Brian Kelly recognizes this. He elevates Notre Dame to levels it had not been in 20 years before his arrival. But every time he ran up against Notre Dame, Clemson, one of these big boys in a playoff, a national championship game, they got run. They couldn't compete. They didn't have the resources to compete against NFL rosters from the South. And so he left and said, I need resources where I can compete. Well, apparently that did not sit well with Brady Quinn. Listen to what Brady Quinn said on Two Pros and a Cup of Joe about Brian Kelly's departure for LSU.
You know, when you go back to how Notre Dame ultimately got here, this was all sparked by the decision of Brian Kelly to choose to go to LSU. Brian Kelly, the head coach at LSU, who back when he left Notre Dame, I think he said sometime in January that he wanted an environment where they had the resources to win a national championship. That was his words. And just to be fully honest and transparent, that ticked me off, man. Literally, I called my attorney the next day and I said, you're going to file for a collective. This is what we're going to do. This is how you're going to put it together. I formed a board, started a fundraise, proved the concept. After that, started to bring on more people and grow and expand, and created a collective that had the resources necessary to support this. So this is back in all triggered because of Brian Kelly.
Brady? Can we define irony, friend? So what you're saying is Brian Kelly leaves Notre Dame because he doesn't have the resources to win. You get ticked off, start a collective, engage boosters, start fundraising so you would have resources to win. Aren't you just validating Brian Kelly's reason for leaving? Oh, wait, hang on. He went on and talked about the reaction from boosters and all that stuff whenever he started this collective.
There are so many people who stepped up from Notre Dame Nation to help put together the resources necessary to support Marcus Freeman, to support the players, to be able to step up because they were ticked off. I'm just one of many. Like when I look at what our collective was able to start and how we were able to help out our football team, it was in large part a call to action because of Brian Kelly. And if you look at where the university is at now and the fact that they're building on to their sports performance center, they've got millions that they've been able to raise through NIL and support their program. And many players, which the quarterback Riley Leonard, probably off the top amongst everyone else, is there in a big reason because of NIL. All those things to me, like I take great pride in.
So you take great pride, Brady. Brady takes great pride in the many boosters of Notre Dame Nation who stepped up to fundraise for NIL to be able to get players like Riley Leonard and to build the performance center and facilities that Brian Kelly wanted. By the way, as soon as he showed up at LSU, Taft committed to building the performance center. They broke ground, and now, by the way, that's open on the back end of football ops. As soon as he got here, he got that. Brian Kelly had to leave for Notre Dame people to be jolted into action. Never mind the fact that Brian Kelly kept getting you on the doorstep, and every time he did, you got humiliated because he didn't have the resources to compete with the best in the country. He got you to a national championship game against Alabama, and you got pounded by an NFL team. He got you into the playoff in 2018. You got pounded by Clemson, which had a bunch of NFL players. He got you into the playoff in 2020 against Alabama, and you got pounded by an NFL team because you didn't have the resources to commit to win. So he leaves, and when he leaves, you all get so butthurt and ticked off that you decide you're going to go start a collective, fundraise for NIL and facilities so you can compete. And now you're going to rub that in Brian Kelly's face? Brother, the reason you have all the stuff you have is because he left. He opened your eyes to the point that you couldn't compete. You were too blind to see it when he's getting his head kicked in. All you could do was blame him and say, oh, it's not us. It can't be Notre Dame. Clearly, it has to be the coach. No, Brady Quinn, you should know. Brady Quinn, you were one of those 10-win teams that took you behind down to the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans and got your tail kicked in by Jamarcus Russell and Brandon LaFell and Buster Davis and Jacob Hester and Keelan Williams and Glenn Dorsey and LaRon Landry and an NFL roster that pounded you into oblivion because you couldn't compete. You lived it. You still can't realize what's in front of your face, Brady Quinn. Oh, he wasn't done. So then, as I've said, The big difference is, okay, yeah, look, Marcus Freeman's got you here, but this is a 12-team playoff era. Let's not get it twisted. Brian Kelly got Notre Dame into a national championship game in the BCS, which only 2 teams made it. Brian Kelly got Notre Dame into the 4-team playoff twice, 4 teams. Notre Dame this year is the 7 seed. They wouldn't have even been in the field a year ago in a 4-team playoff. They'd still be watching at home like you and me. Oh, but Brady Quinn doesn't see it that way.
And I know there's a lot of people who are like, hey, the mission's not done. This is no different than Brian Kelly. BS. This is very different than when Brian Kelly had this football team. The way Marcus has built this thing up, the way Notre Dame has built up over his tenure so far, it feels different because it is different. This is nothing comparable to what Brian Kelly was like when he was the head coach there. They had some great teams. The 2012 team that went to a national championship with Manti Te'o. You look at some of the teams with Ian Book, guys who were able to get to the playoff. The way this team is playing, the way it's built, the resources that they have, it's on a different level now.
If Notre Dame shows up to the national championship game on Monday against Ohio State and gets their head kicked in, the same way Brady Quinn's team got its head kicked in by an NFL roster from LSU, and Brian Kelly's teams got their head kicked in by NFL rosters from Alabama and Clemson. Yeah, Brady, we're going to be having the same conversation about Notre Dame. Listen, I like Marcus Freeman. I think he's done a good job. Like, we can say 2 things can be true at the same time. Brian Kelly elevated that program, and Marcus Freeman's doing a good job. Marcus Freeman inherited a program that finished the previous season number 5 in the country, 1 spot out of a 12-team playoff. By the way, a 4-team playoff. If it were a 12-team playoff era, Brian Kelly would have been in the playoff his last season in South Bend. But I got news for you, Coach. Here it comes again. Another team, a roster filled with dudes going to the NFL, when your roster is a bunch of tryhards, and you're a 9.5-point underdog against Ohio State, and they're probably going to shove your nose in the dirt for 3.5 hours, and everyone's going to come out of that and laugh at you and say, same old Notre Dame who's not ready for the big stage. Then what are you going to say, Brady? Is it Marcus Freeman? Or is that your collective still hasn't raised enough money to be able to compete with the best teams in college football? We'll see. Brady Quinn. Sour over that behind kicking that LSU and Les Miles gave him in the Sugar Bowl in January of 2007. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or you were paying for twice? That has happened to millions of people. A few subscriptions you didn't realize you were paying for, and Rocket Money makes it so easy to track them down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending. It helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals that you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. So check out Rocket Money. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions. Reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Wrapping up another edition of Locked On LSU. Basketball Tigers got a much needed win over Arkansas, 78-74. So John Calipari's Hogs fall to 0-4. They're fighting it, man. That's an expensive coach that they pried out of Kentucky. And they got, they got some NBA players. Boogie Flan, their freshman point guard, was a 5-star, #1 player in the country who's there with the Hogs. And they got some talent, but they have not really been able to put it together. It's interesting because that really is Calipari's MO, man. They've got good backcourt players. They got length, and this Arkansas team has it. And if they ever put it together, they could be pretty good. But they're fighting it right now, 0-4 in the conference. And for LSU, they desperately needed it. LSU trailed by 2 at half, 36-34 was a competitive first half. Tigers didn't lead until just under 10 minutes to play in the ball game, and they never relinquished that lead, although Arkansas got close. And then with a minute 19, Cam Carter made a couple of free throws. LSU was up 7, 74-67, and it looked like the Tigers would coast home. But Arkansas gets a layup. Mike Williams makes a couple of free throws. Trevon Brazile makes a 3. And then Mike Williams turns the ball over. Derek Fountain commits a foul. A couple of free throws. You look up, and now with 28 seconds left, it's a 2-point game. And you're getting that, oh my God, is this really going to happen type feeling. And they send Jordan Sears to the foul line with 21 seconds to go. He makes them both. LSU's back up 4. And the Tigers were able to get home. That was your final 78-74. So LSU beats Arkansas, gets their first conference win of the season. My goodness, was this just so desperately needed. And I don't know that LSU is going to be able to play themselves back onto the bubble and into tournament conversation. But, you're 1-3 now in conference play. And, we're going to look back at the opportunities that you had. And you had an opportunity at home against Vanderbilt. You had an opportunity on the road against Missouri, which had lost 19 straight league games. No one's going to fault you for going on the road and losing to a ranked Ole Miss team. But, realistically, this is an LSU team, if they were playing their best, that could be 3-1 in the league, and that would have set you up with the possibility of getting to 8 league wins, which should be enough to get you in the tournament. But instead, you're sitting here at 1-3. Now, this weekend, you're headed to Texas A&M before you head to number 4 Alabama. Then you're home against number 1 Auburn. Realistically, you're not going to win any of the next 3. So you'd fall to 1-6, and then you got to find a way to make some type of headway. Texas, at Georgia, Ole Miss, at Arkansas, at Oklahoma, South Carolina. That's your stretch. Texas, at Georgia, Ole Miss, at Arkansas, at Oklahoma. That 5-game stretch, you're probably going to have to go 4-1. And if you do, that gets you to 5 league wins, and somewhere down the stretch, Florida, Tennessee, at Mississippi State, at Kentucky, Texas A&M, your last 5 all against ranked opponents. I don't know how you scratch out 3 wins there. 2, I don't think is enough, but 2 would send you to the SEC tournament with at least a chance to play yourself onto the bubble. It's why this game was so big. This game was so big because it mathematically at least gives you a shot. It keeps your heartbeat alive. You have a pulse still to try to play yourself back onto the bubble. I don't think it's going to happen for this team, just realistically. But had you lost this game, there would have been no realistic shot. At least now, you got a heartbeat, you got a pulse, and an opportunity to get there. We'll see if they can maybe surprise everyone, steal a game here or there along the way. All right, that'll do it for us here today on today's episode, of Locked On LSU. If you're new, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.